banking ahead. Konechny tips it. He got it past the defenseman and gets to the puck. Konechny cutting it on goal. He scores! A beauty from Konechny, and the Flyers take a 1-0 lead. Beat the defenseman, then beat the goaltender. And then Konechny's third goal in the last 2 games has the Flyers on top.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey. Hey everybody, it is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast episode number 123. God, there's so much going on. Just wanted to let people know Chef is out again tonight. He is attending to some important business, helping some people in the community through the work that he does. But we do have with us tonight the great Dan Silver. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. We're in the middle of the maelstrom this week, so it's fun.
Yeah, in a lot more ways than one. And, of course, we're so happy to have from sportsology.com, Off the Post Radio, and so many other outlets, again with us, Russ Cohen. How you doing?
Good. Best time of the year, honestly.
Yeah, you can just burn the calories thinking this time of year, but it's all right. So, Russ, let me get you to weigh in because Dan and I did an emergency trade show for Ryan Ellis coming to the Flyers, for Phil Myers and Nolan Patrick. So what's your impression overall of that trade? Then we'll get into some of the other stuff we're going to do tonight.
Sure. I mean, the trade was fine. They did give up a little bit. They did. Myers has, a decent ceiling. And so you did trade that away. I think they felt like, hey, we just needed that top pairing more than we needed total balance. So they paid a little more, and that's fine. Ellis is really good. I've liked Ellis for a long time and pre-draft and all that. I put up a picture people want to see on Sportsology, a picture of him taking a picture with a fan at the draft in Montreal. He looks like he's 12. But he's always had a great shot, always been a great skater. He's gotten stronger over the years. He's gotten better defensively over the years. I think it was really blown out of proportion. Like, hey, he's starting to slip. I mean, it's unfortunate that Nashville has this belief that they need mostly bigger defensemen. And I think, unfortunately, that's going around the league now. So it seems like every team could have like one smaller defenseman, and then that's it. Everybody else has to be big and tough. And it's like, I think that's going to change. I don't think that's what's winning Stanley Cups, honestly. And I think some teams are going to find that out. But as far as this goes, this is a good pickup. He gives what they need. Nolan Patrick needed a change. He really can't get out of his own head, and it has nothing to do with the migraines. It's, the biggest knock I would say on him, and I was happy to see him back skating well, but he would just try and be too fancy out there. He just, these drop passes, these little plays between his legs, whatever. It's like he really just needed to simplify things, especially when he started getting into that scoring drought, and to try and get on track. He never really did. And so now when he goes over there, I don't think it magically changes, but I think it helps a bit just, switching markets and realizing, all right, I've got to, fix this, or I could be heading down a bad way.
Yeah. He goes to Vegas and smiles for the first time in, I don't know, maybe since the day the Flyers drafted him. There's some stories out there about some of the other things about Nolan's coachability. And Dan, let me bring you in a little bit and ask Russ about this, because, Russ is connected. He knows what's going on. So why don't you share that information that we talked about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and, I'm a big proponent of the trade. And in terms of Nolan Patrick, one thing that I'd heard, and I'm certainly not a reporter. I don't get paid to do it. But, for the first time ever this week, I kind of put out there that from what I'd heard from a source that's extremely close to the organization was that, a couple of years ago, 2018-2019 season, Nolan Patrick, the third to last game of the season against the Dallas Stars, I was told that he had a heated confrontation on the bench with Coach Scott Gordon. They really got into it. Some of the other players were like, what is this all about? The next two games, Nolan Patrick was out with an upper body injury. I don't remember seeing an injury. So make of that what you will, and Scott Gordon downplayed it from what I was told, sort of like, a couple days later, but that's what I was told. And it just, I think, goes to speak to maybe some of the attitude things we've heard about him. He's maybe kind of a little bit entitled. And so I hope he puts it together. And honestly, I won't be surprised if Nolan Patrick, blossoms somewhere else, but I don't think it was going to be here. I think that the bridges were burned with the Flyers organization. I don't think he wanted to be here. So I'm good for him. He's getting another start somewhere, but I think he's going to have to turn around the attitude if he's going to succeed.
Yeah, I've witnessed the attitude. He, I witnessed it at a couple points one season. So just, doing interviews. So I knew that was there. I didn't know about that particular situation, but I knew just the overall attitude was there. Yeah, so I'm not surprised at that. And I do think you're right. I do think he needs to be knocked down a peg, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And ASF, Anthony Sanfilippo, was just saying he's one of the most uncoachable players he's seen in Philadelphia in a long, long time. And I
can't say that. Like, I can't say that because I haven't had long discussions with anybody about that. I could see where, Gordon would get mad just at the things I said. So, because Gordon really, expects guys to play the right way, all effort, all the time, guys to, really just play to their ability. And I do feel like there was times where that just didn't happen.
Yeah, but either way, across the spectrum, this is not to just dump on him, because it wouldn't shock me if Nolan kind of got it together now, because sometimes players need that. Things come too easy for them. Yep. And when he came here, I think they catered to him a little bit too much, and that didn't help either party. So, but gents, let's not bury the lead as we have done. Shane Gostisbehere has been traded to the Arizona Coyotes along with 2022 second and seventh round pick. The Flyers basically get back cap space. Not a shock. They really need to clear that space. Russ, your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are I'm okay with it. Is it a high price? Yes. Is it just a statement that a lot of teams don't want your high salaried players for low output? Yes, that's what the statement is. I like Gostisbehere. I mean, he's in my book, Sticks and Stones, my college hockey book with Adam Woden. So if people want to get that, but we have a profile on him in there. I covered him, in Philly during the Frozen Four. I have a soft spot for him, but I do feel like he needed to change in the worst way, even though like 2 years ago he said he didn't. But he did. He needed to change. Every time he would miss the net, either the media or the fans would be like, ugh, you just kind of get that sound. And it was unfortunate. He started to get it back a little bit this year, but still not enough. Like the accuracy on the shots just not quite there. The more hesitancy to get a puck out of the corner, those kinds of things. So I think the change will do him good. I can't say he's going to have a bounce back because he's in Arizona. Like, it's not a great place. So I just think it's good for him. I think it's good for the Flyers because they needed that cap space desperately. And I also think it shows that if that was the price for Gostisbehere, imagine what the price would be just to try and alleviate Jake Voracek's salary. So I think that's what you learned. And also on the press conference, the fact that one GM was asking for York and another GM was asking for their first. The fact that a few minutes later Ron Francis was mentioned made me think he's probably one of the GMs that asked for one of those things, because I did hear that Francis's prices were high. So, based on that, I think Fletcher did the best he could. I think he did what he had to do on that one. And you know what? It'll help them in the sense that it gets the others signed. It's not necessarily going to help them in pursuit of anything more than a backup goalie. So I think they're still going to have to clear more space if they want to do that, unless, somehow Ryan Suter came here cheap. But I hear him and Parisi are interested on the island as a package deal. So, and if that happens, then, so they still may have to make a maneuver, but at least it gets them on the path. And at least they could reward the other guys that they have to sign that are RFAs.
Right, exactly. You have to have Hart and Sanheim, and the Flyers currently have like about $13.885 million. So it would seem that they would need to clear at least another $5 or $6 million somehow to get, to address some of these other needs outside of backup goaltender.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 for sure. Because a backup goalie is going to, cost them probably $1 million, $2 million. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It's like you were saying at the press conference, Fletcher. I've got to give him credit. He really put it out there in terms of, we'll find out what we look like in, between now and next Wednesday, which obviously is the first day of free agency. I guess that's the 28th. Yeah. So, and he said he's got a lot of work to do. So he knows he's got a lot in front of him if he's going to take this team to another level. Because we were talking about with Charlie O'Connor, he's got a couple players, particularly Sean Couturier, probably going through an evaluation year right now.
Yeah, well, don't think he's so benevolent about it. That his higher ups chatted with him too, and he was pretty honest about that too, pushing him to say that, pushing him knowing that he had to do better. So he's got pressure from up top too. It's not like he's got like a free ride here.
Yeah, no, it
was interesting.
Yeah.
He said during the press conference that he's literally talked to every single team in the league about Shane Gostisbehere. And, Russ alluded to how difficult it clearly is going to be to move these guys. And, the fact that it was funny because the original report was that they got the second and the 7th round pick. And for about 10 minutes, everyone on Twitter was like, oh my God, Chuck Fletcher's a genius. And then of course it was reported, no, you had to give up a second and the 7th. So, So what's the price if you want to get someone to take on Voracek? What's the price if you want someone to take on JVR? Some people think that he has value to people. I'm not so sure about that, but I guess we'll see.
And the other thing, Dan, not to interrupt, but the other thing that's big on this, if people go to Cap Friendly, we happened to look it up on the Buzzcast. We didn't really know. The other thing that made this an advantageous deal for Arizona is the Flyers already paid the last bonus to Gostisbehere, so the cash that they have to pay is much less than the cap hit. So that's right up the alley for Arizona too.
Yep.
What was that, like $2.25 million or something?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'd heard something along those lines. Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, Isaiah, they've got about $13.8 million. Let's say that Sanheim and Hart cost them $7 to $7.5 million. That would leave them with about $6 to $6.5 million. And the main holes right now are the second pair right-hand defenseman, backup goalie, and then I think they still need a third line center. So, that's where you've got to move a Jake, or you're going to have to kind of make a hockey trade where they've been rumored with the Sabres and Sam Reinhart.
I'm not sure that one's real, by the way, because I know people in Buffalo, nobody knows anything about that one, including, some of their better reporters. So I don't know if that Reinhart one's real.
Yeah, but either way, I think that Chuck's not just going to be looking to move out Voracek so they can sign free agents. I think he is trying to make trades.
He is.
Trades. I wouldn't be surprised if Konechny's involved. The first round pick clearly is in play based on what he said at the press conference today. So it's the next day is going to be very interesting with the NHL entry draft. A lot of players are going to be getting moved. The funny thing about Seattle is, we kept hearing about how big the price was from Ron Francis to get him to take on salaries, and that's clearly true.
Yep.
And now the question is, did he overplay his hand? I mean, because their team, they've got a good defense group, but their forwards are not very good. And, the goalies look all right. If Chris Driedger's the real deal, then they're set there. But they basically turned, they had a lot of really good offensive players to pick from. And Jordan Eberle is really the only high octane guy that they took. Maybe Yanni Gourde to a certain extent. But it sounds like, Ron Francis played chicken with the NHL GMs and they weren't willing to give up the price. And now maybe he'll come back to Chuck Fletcher and say, hey, you know what, if you want to give us Voracek, we'll do it for a second round pick instead of whatever insane price he was asking. But I think that Vegas probably did it a little bit better than Seattle did. And we'll see what happens. But it's going to be an interesting kind of storyline to follow.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a flat cap back then. They didn't know how it was going to play out, the other GM, so they clearly offered up way too many players in some of the trades, Chuck Fletcher included, right? So I think that was a part of it. I think Francis's price was too high. I think he did go a little bit too much for grit and height and weight and hard to play against. I would have taken Jake Bean over Morgan Geekie. I like Morgan Geekie, but the high ceiling on him is a third line center where Jake Bean could be possibly a top pairing defenseman or definitely top four. So, and again, they're not loaded, like you said, Dan, with offensive defensemen, but he clearly had a plan. So that's fine. I'm not going to kill him for that. I don't think he would go back to Fletcher for a Voracek deal because he has cash to spend. I think he's going to get a few more free agents. They're not going to spend to the cap. That's clear. And then I think they're going to make one or two more trades. Like he made the Pitlick trade. Whether Giordano gets traded or not, there was a lot of talk with the Rangers yesterday, and that went right up until, the time he went on the stage. So whether that's dead now or that's going to get revived, who knows? But it still wouldn't shock me if there's one or two more trades, but he only did have one side deal. So he was always going to be on the conservative side of eating bad contracts or taking players with bad contracts. But he did overpay on Jamie Alexiak a lot. And he did overpay a little bit on Larson, but more on Alexiak for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, you wonder if he's kind of going to circle back and maybe try to extract a price or a bigger price. Knowing that these teams have this pent-up demand to make changes, and maybe he thinks the prices are going to be even better. He'll be able to extract a prospect. Instead of taking JVR, at the draft, he could circle back and say, well, if you really want me to take that player, I want X. I want Bobby Brink, or he can be.
Yeah,
it's possible.
It's possible. I just don't think he's in that headspace now. I don't. I never felt like he was going to. We all probably never felt he would take Voracek without big payment. So that's obvious. But yeah. I never felt like he was taking JVR either, because I think the book is out on JVR. He is a good player. He has long stretches of inactivity out there. He's a little more engaged than he used to be defensively, but when you need goals, you don't get them. And when you're not expecting them, you get a ton. Last year, he probably did his best in carrying the team, excuse me, for a little while. But but the consistency is not there, and teams around the league know that.
What about as a conduit, where he's that third party? He takes a couple million on his cap because they're still below the floor, right?
Oh yeah.
And then he could get maybe there was a rumor that obviously this is not going to come true, but he would get involved in Voracek, Tarasenko, and he would end up with Robert Haig or something. I mean, it still seems like something. I mean, they're really bereft at center. It would seem like at the very least they want to get a couple more offensive players.
But they could just get him on the free agent market too. I do think there's a possibility. I think the Flyers have to try and set up like an NBA trade, like Dan was saying, because I don't think Voracek for Tarasenko 1-for-1's ever going to happen. I wouldn't want Tarasenko under any terms, to be honest, because he's had 3 of the shoulder surgeries that are on record for the last few years, and then he had the one after the World Juniors when he had his shoulder hanging in the locker room, and I spoke to him and he told me how bad it was. He just said the word bad. Like he couldn't speak English then, but he did tell me that because the kid played and scored goals on that shoulder, but that was before he got to the Blues. So he's had a lot of trouble. And I know there's Flyers fans that say, well, we could just put him on LTIR and then we're saving a year on Jake. But guess what? Then you don't have Jake's points. And even though he may be a frustrating player, he does put up some points. And then you have to all of a sudden go find that replacement again, maybe like in the middle of the season. And that's hard to do too. So I think there's too much downside with the Tarasenko. I think they need to find another player, whether, they try to start looking at Duchesne or Johansson, something like that, where, you have to get more players involved and get it to the point where both teams are good with it. The cap hits either match or someone will take a little more. I think that's the only way you're going to do it. Otherwise, I think even though Voracek is asked to be traded, doesn't matter. Like Aaron Rodgers wants to be traded too, right? So far, he's still on the team. Like it's just, wanting to be traded is fine. Getting traded is a whole different thing.
Gotcha.
Was
Dan?
it confirmed that he's asked to be traded?
Well, that's what Eck reported it today, and we heard it from 2 different people. So, that's what's out there.
So, Dan, before we get to the draft, a word came out that the CHL was going to work something out with the NHL. There's certain junior eligible players, if they played more than 20 games, could go back to the AHL if they played in the AHL 20 games or more. I wanted to ask Russ about Tyson Forster and Zayd Wisdom, who would both qualify under that proviso, what his thoughts were.
Well, Forster, I definitely would send back because he needs to play a lot more games, get his skating down, get his defense down. The shot's there. We all love the shot. The shot will be there. That's not going anywhere. His physical play isn't going to go anywhere. But those other things need to be refined, and I think it's hard to refine those kinds of things at the AHL level. Now, Wisdom is kind of an interesting one because now the AHL had lousy goaltending last year. We have to be honest about that. So I'm not looking at the goal total, but I did like the effort, and he did play a very similar game to what he would play in junior. So you might be able to make the argument for Wisdom to stay because his game isn't necessarily predicated on scoring as much as it is hard play along the walls, good physical play, get around the net, score that way. That may be something he could still work on at the AHL level. But I think for Forster, just to be able to score the goals, you want him to be able to score and get top power play and all that. I don't think it's best to do that at Lehigh.
Gotcha. Interesting. But I figured the other way around. Dan, what would you say?
I defer to what Russ's thoughts on that one. Just thinking about it, you would think that both of these guys were pretty good at the AHL level last year, and perhaps especially Forster really came on towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. So it would almost be kind of like a step back for him if he goes down to the OHL. But I can see what he's saying too about maybe that league might be better for developing certain parts of his skill set. So, I think either way, it's good to have options for those guys because especially the way that Wisdom is built, it's possible that he could be an NHL contributor at some point soon, maybe probably not this year, but the way that his game is built, he could probably step in and not hurt you necessarily. The Flyers have a lot of depth up front, but it's going to be important because as we go along, and as Couturier is going to need a new contract, and Claude Giroux will probably end up taking a pay cut, but you're going to need to keep having guys coming in on entry level contracts, because you're going to have to pay Joel Farabee next offseason. Farabee's going to be up for a contract. Wade Allison, and if he has a good year, who knows what could happen there. So there's a couple guys that you're probably going to have to pay next offseason. So we talk about managing the cap for this year, but you're also going to have to be managing it for next year. Obviously, that's not the focus right now, but you've got to kind of look at it. So, I think either way, it's good that they'll have the option, and the Flyers can figure out what they want to do with those guys.
Yeah, I think the option is key. I think you said that well, Dan. And I think I'm just looking at Forster. Like, if you want him to reach his potential being a top 6 level, then I'd send him back.
Well, that has to be the priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, Russ, you have on sportsology.com your top 32 NHL draft eligible players, version 4.0. So I encourage everybody to go to sportsology.com and check that out.
I'm laughing at myself for doing 4, because when I did 3, honestly, I thought I was done. And then I did some more work and found a few more things, and I'm like, I'm not done. But at least it's not like 30 of them like ESPN would do for, like the NFL. So
Right. So it looks like Owen Power has really just kind of pulled away a little bit. He's in a kind of like a mini tier by himself, but really that first 8 or 9, if you include the goaltender, perhaps, or at least one of the goaltenders. That's a little controversial. What's the other goalie, Kosa?
Sebastian Kosa, yeah.
Right. So, but it looks like that is really with the separation point, and then there's another tier down. Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit about how this whole thing's going to work with some of these players not getting as much exposure as others.
Sure. So Owen Power, it's 99.9 Buffalo. All the things are pointing to it. Pointing from a press conference today. They never came out and said it. They don't have to. But just based on that, the vibe, everything else, it seems like that's a big deal, and it's happening. Now, we also have to remember with college players like Owen Power, he was asked, hey, you thinking about getting like, an autograph signing going or a sponsor or something like that now that you can? And he's like, yeah. So that is an extra like feather in the cap and money in a pocket for a young player to be able to do before they even get to the NHL and still try and like win a national championship. So that makes college hockey a little more attractive than it used to be. And at some point it may make it on par or more attractive than the CHL if they don't watch it. So that's something. So I do think you're right. I think he's on his own. And then I do think you're good through Kent Johnson as far as that next group, wherever they all fall, wherever those guys fall. McTavish could fall in that group too, because there are a lot of teams that really like him. I may have him lower than some, but I don't. And look, 8's pretty high, right? I mean, 8 means 8 on a ranking means, I think he's top 15. And so, but he could go top 10 too. And that's what I think Central Scouting was thinking too. But you never know. 1 or 2 changed picks, and that changes a lot. There's a lot to like about his game, and he does score tough goals. He does score down low. He's smart. So there's definitely things that are translatable. So, but it's just, I feel like some of these other guys have just a much higher end to them. And sometimes I want the higher ceiling with players. So I think that's where you're talking. Wallstead is on his own island as far as I'm concerned about goalies, but I'm not a goalie expert. And we had Brad Allen on our draft show, and he really loves Kosa. So, and he's really a goalie guy. So I had to take that into account. The only difference is that I'm going to say on this is I had been getting reports from people in Sweden for 2-3 years ago on Wallstead, and for me to personally keep an eye on him and what he's doing there. And so I feel like just based on the competition he's faced, Hossa may win in the end, but right now I think Wallsted's ahead of him, and I feel like most teams feel that way too. So now, based on the Ned Jelkovic trade today, maybe that means Detroit won't take him because they won't look for him to get there in 3 years, or maybe they look at Ned Jelkovic as a stopgap, and they will. So, because that's originally where I was thinking there'd be a chance of him going. So I'd be surprised if he gets out of the top 10. No way he gets out of the top 15. I can tell you that. Now, the reason Brandt Clark got switched on my list with Luke Hughes was twofold. With Luke Hughes, it was about the medicals, because I wanted to hear he was skating and everything was the way it was, because his game is predicated on speed. And when you have a foot laceration like that and you have to get it operated on and you're getting out in there, and, I had to make sure all the reports were good. So all the reports came back good on him that I got. And that's where I pretty much had Luke Hughes before early on. So, and it's not to say his game is perfect. There's still some things he has to work on. But now that he's healthy, that really does help him. I also think that with Brandt Clark, we are nitpicking a little. But again, skating's a big thing, and there are things that he doesn't do right skating-wise. He's almost fighting himself. Now, he has been able to easily overcome that where he's been playing. And that includes even in the Swiss League. But as he goes up the ladder, that battle gets harder. Like I go back and I look at Matthew Strome. Every year now, I don't want to say Clark's at that level skating because he's not. He's better than that. But Matthew Strome used to be a guy I looked at in every, rookie camp, and Barb Underhill, her name would come up like, yeah, he's working with Barb Underhill, and I'd see him this year and I'd be like, all right, a little better. I'd see him the next year. All right, a little better. Everything else was good about his game. But you know what? Here we are, and Matthew Strome's skating is just not there. So, you do have to look at that, and he will work on it. I do love everything else about his game, offensively especially. Defensively, he's good. He's not great. He is more of a puck retrieval guy than a really strong defender, but he does at least do some stick work that you feel like can maybe get better too. But his brain, as far as, zone entries and making that first pass and even going deep in and making things happen and kind of blowing up the other team by holding on to the puck, he's really good at that. So he's still in the top 10. Probably the most polarizing guy in the top 15 is Fabian Lysell, because he's just an elite skater already. He has a great shot. He passes the puck well, has terrific vision. He's not a physical guy. He's not like even a defensive guy at this point in time. But there are just people don't like him. Some teams just don't like him. Some ranking services just look for issues there. And so he's a guy that is all over the board. Somebody is going to take him, though, in the first round. I mean, there's no question, but he could drop. If he goes in the 20s, it's not going to be a shock, even though he has better talent than that. But he has to sort of put it together, and he may be another guy that, has to mature a little. We'll see. So those are things that you look at with Lysell. Moving down, Sillinger, Lucius, I think they're really close. I think Lucius made a nice rise because people were a little worried that he had knee surgery, but he overcame that.
So, yeah, you're talking about Chaz Lucius,
center. And Cole Sillinger.
And the only reason I just wanted to cut in there just a little bit, because now you're getting into the area. If the Flyers kept the pick, but they're drafting officially at 14, but Arizona had to lose their pick because of shenanigans by what's his name, John Chayka. So they lost their pick, so the Flyers are actually picking their 13th spot. This is kind of where the Flyers might pick. These are players the Flyers fans would want to perk up and know about. Yeah,
if they're there, it's possible that they'll both be there. I think there's a really good chance. Lucius has been really rising up, though, because now that his knee surgery is past him and people could read about it on sportsology.com. I did interview him a couple weeks ago. He really got over the mental hurdle there. If you ever had to overcome a really bad knee injury, I've had to. So I could tell you there's some very tough days, a lot of them. And he had a lot of them. He overcame them. He came back. He looked good. The All-American Prospects game was one of the first games he came back, and he really shined in that. And he's a guy that can score down low. He could really draw the defenders to him and then make a great pass, because everybody's worried that he's going to shoot it in because he's a goal scorer. But he's a good skater. He's smart, and he's just one of these guys now that, yeah, he would be good for the Flyers. Sillinger would be good for the Flyers. Corson Kuhlman's, again, everybody's going to say, well, we have enough defensemen, whatever, but you never know. Corson Kuhlman's could be a heck of a player, because, this is a guy who played in the AJHL, and we've heard about guys like that before. And, there's been high-end ones like Cale Makar and other guys that are in the right now in the system for other teams like San Jose, and they playing college hockey. So Kuhlman's has a lot of offensive ability, a lot, and he's a really good skater. So this is a guy who, if he puts it together, could have a really great offensive package and be maybe a top 4 guy in the NHL. But it's a long, when you're in that league and you're not Cale Makar, it's going to be a little longer development cycle. But he's got a great wrist shot. He's not physical. Maybe he'll do better with the stick work, but he also has great catch-up speed. So, there have been plenty of defenders that make up for it that way, because when a guy's just, getting that deep past them, they can catch up to him and at least stick it away. So there's that. I like Zach Dean a lot out of Gatineau. Now, some people have him, even in the second round. That's fine. Having him where I have him means it could be somewhere in the 20s, or it could be earlier if someone takes him. He can score and shoot. A lot of people haven't seen him, and I do rely on. I have some people close to me that actually do cover out in the queue a lot, and so he's a guy that I feel like is undervalued and not talked about a lot with the pundits, and that's why it's like, if you see him on someone's list and he's 50, this is the kind of year where, listen, we're doing a lot of projecting. We're doing a lot with video. There's not a lot that we've seen live. I mean, I got to see the All-American Prospects game live. I got to see, the Frozen Four live. And other than the Flyers games and seeing some prospects but not draft eligible, that was my hockey year. Everything else was on video.
Right.
So the only difference that I piece together is I speak to a lot of guys and speak to a lot of guys about other guys too. So I do use some of that if I feel like there's one little thing that makes a difference. Oscar Olofsson's another guy that's rapidly shooting up the charts, an SHL guy, really great skater, elusive from defenders, great shot. Isaac Rosen, even though I have him ranked 21st, is he 21st? Something like that.
21st.
Yeah,
yeah.
21st.
Yeah.
He
right winger.
He's moving up the charts too. And he was, playing mostly in the junior level for this. Actually, mostly in the SHL, because the junior level was shut down. So that was the thing where he was playing there, then it shut down. So then he played, and maybe he had to figure it out for a little while. So that, you're never going to see big numbers most of the time from these younger guys, but he's a heck of a player. I'll tell you, the least talked about guy is the Czech defenseman Stanislav Svozil at number 19. Terrific in the in international play, really good passer, walks the line, accurate one-timer, does all those things well. He's 6'1", 180. I think teams know about him. I don't think enough pundits paid attention to him for whatever reason, and I get it. I mean, we're all going to have holes in our coverage. We are. I've heard, Zachary Leheru's name with the Flyers. I wouldn't take him in that spot. I've heard the Brad Marchand thing. I've spoke to people about that. And sure, there's a little of that in him. But if you think about how many of those Brad Marchands are in the league and successful and scoring and doing that, I don't know, Gallagher, him, maybe there's one or two more. That's it. So I think it's tough to draft a guy hoping for that. I think there was a guy named Sam Morin they were drafting, hoping he was something like Chris Pronger. And, we saw what happened with that. No offense to Sam. It's just, I think sometimes you could project too much. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I probably have him, even where I have him, higher ranked than some other people. So he is a good player. I wouldn't take him that early. And then, this first round's good. This is a good first round. After that, it is going to start to get a little iffy. I think right around. So I'm looking here, shuffling the papers. I got like 10 sheets in front of me, all my stuff, and so I think right around the 40 mark. Then it's going to be a little bit of hit and miss because this isn't like a super deep draft, and we don't have a lot of data on these guys. And there were a ton of Zoom calls trying to make up for other things, so for teams. So there's going to be some guesswork here. Another guy who could move up on these lists, Brendan Hoffman. I saw some things that I really liked, and I saw some things that I didn't like. So that's probably why he's at 26, but other people may have him higher. I don't think anybody has Red Savage in the first round like I do, but sometimes, and he's Brian Savage's kid, so Flyers fans would know him,
right.
And the Canadians. Sometimes there's just something about a player that you say, if this guy gets in the NHL, he is going to score goals around the net. He just has a knack for it. He has a nose for the net. He's good around that area in the circles. He can get there. He could do it. And so I think he could be undervalued that way. And Nikita Chiprikov's an interesting one because I think he's going to play in the NHL. And even though I have him at 31, the only reason I have him there is because when he played in like the MHL, he would light it up. When he played in the KHL, like he couldn't light it up, but he also wasn't playing, top minutes, top power play, anything like that. But he did show some good things away from the puck and actually some physical play and some smart play. He just wasn't scoring, right? So I feel like it's an incomplete for Chiprikov, and he's one of those guys that 2-3 years down the line we could say, wow, you know what? He really has put it together. So he could be another one that's sort of sitting there that somebody falls in love with, maybe around 18, somewhere between 18 and 25 or something like that, and says, yeah, you know what? We got to get this guy. But I have, I didn't do a ridiculously long list this year. I didn't. I probably have 55 to 60 names. That's it. And I just feel like it's one of those years where if teams will do probably a little over 100. Because again, all these players won't get picked. They'll get picked in different rounds. And they certainly have, other names, long shots that they could easily talk about. But, sometimes you see these lists of like 200. In this kind of year, a list of 200 is just crazy. And I don't even think teams undertook that because they just didn't have the manpower and probably enough confidence to see enough on some of these guys. Even if you're glued to your computer 24/7 watching video or on a lot of these guys, it's just not enough. That's the reality.
Yep, that's where it's at. And there's a possibility that trades could upstage much of the draft.
Oh, yeah.
And, Dan, maybe want to comment on maybe some of the players that are in the Flyers range or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Russ has probably done a little more research on some of the players. I read a lot of this stuff. Probably haven't watched as many highlights as I could have. It seems to me that you talk about best player available, right? And that's what they're saying they're going to do. Center is obviously a position where I think that it would be nice if the best player available is also a center. And, two of the guys that Russ mentioned, Cole Sillinger and Chaz Lucius, I think are two guys that if they get to the Flyers pick, would make sense for them. Fedor Svechkov's a guy that seems to be polarizing scouts. I see some scouts have him in the 30s, some have him, right around 10. So he seems to be maybe in a somewhat lesser tier. It's hard to figure out what, obviously how the Flyer scouts look at things. I think the goaltenders are interesting. I've seen a bunch of mock drafts with both goaltenders being off the board before the Flyers pick. And I've seen a lot of people mocking Sebastian Cossa to Ottawa at 10, actually going a pick or two in front of Wallstedt. If the Flyers don't trade the pick and the goalies get to them, that's going to be interesting because it seems like they're both franchise type of goaltenders, those don't come along, and you don't want to, kind of test, I guess, Carter Hart's mental patience in terms of maybe drafting a goalie, but I'm not sure that that's supposed to be a consideration, because I think if Carter Hart's the goaltender of the future here, I think he's going to have to be more mentally tough than being rattled by the team taking a goalie early on. So that's going to be interesting too. So I think if they keep the pick, they'll either take a center or a goaltender, but I think there's probably a greater than 50% chance that they move the pick.
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance they move the pick. I think a lot of what Dan said is right on. I still think they're going to look at center even more than goalie. I don't think they're worried about, like you said, taking a goalie with Carter Hart, because even in the best case scenario, you're still talking 3-4 years, and you're a backup for a while. It's not like it's tomorrow. It's not like Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, or what happened here in town with the Eagles. Although there'll be at least one media person that will write that.
Oh, no question.
Because they don't understand how long it will take one of these goalies to make it to the NHL, and they'll write it, and they'll be like, "Oh, Carter Hart's going to be looking over his shoulder," and it's like, stop. But it's going to happen. But I do think it's most beneficial if they get a center, and I can make the argument that I don't think both goalies will be gone, but even if they are both gone, it's probably the best thing that could happen to them, just because I think center is just something more that they need. And I can make you the argument there's 1, 2, 3, 4, because I didn't mention Francisco Pinelli, but I like him a lot. Like 4 or 5 centers that they could choose from in that spot. It would seem like, why would you pass that up? But again, they passed up Cole Caulfield, so what do I know?
No, I mean, all of a sudden center depth is a thing. They're not sure what's going on with Frost. He might need to be a trade chip. Right. Patrick is gone. Rupsov, to me, has probably is not going to make it. Looks like a European player at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he'll make it at center if he makes it. And so I think you're right with that. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do the center depth thing. It was interesting what Dan said about Svechkov, and he did have a real good showing in international play. I think what it is with him, Dan, is he a center or is he a winger? I think really that's what it boils down to. And there are so many guys that go into the draft and they say, oh, yeah, I play center or can play center. And Travis Konechny was one of those guys. And I remember saying he's not going to be a center. Now, you're not always right, because I remember when I heard that maybe they would turn Pierre-Luc Dubois into a center, I said, I could see it. I could see it if they give him the right time. And they did. And they let him play a full season, and it worked out because he's a physical guy. So it can happen, and it might even happen for William Eklund, because he can play both, even though he's been playing left wing lately. A few years ago, he was a center, like 2-3 years ago. I think it was 3. So, and he does like both positions. So he's sort of playing both sides of the fence too, when I was talking to him. And so, that's what you have to look at with Svechkov. I don't know if he's a center. That's my thing. So that's why I have him where I have him. If he were a center, like if I felt like he was a guaranteed center, I'd have him higher.
Yeah, and I've got my own roller hockey playoff game here tonight, so I got to head out the door here in a minute. But good luck in that. Thank you. We're the top seed and we're playing the bottom seed, so it's going to be a big upset if we lose. But the Svechkov thing, and again, I wouldn't know him from Adam if whatever. But I see a Russian center who's defense first, predicted to go in the middle of the first round, and I immediately think of like German Rupsov. So that's probably not fair of me to do. But it's just sort of my natural reaction.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Not fair. No, it's not fair. And I think people have, believe it or not, over exaggerated his defense. Like I've heard like, oh yeah, he's great defensively. I don't know if he's great defensively. He has good defensive instincts. He's definitely can play defense for sure. But I think you have to always be careful with the young guys in defense, because especially when you're playing internationally, and that's a different kind of thing, because you're not playing with these guys all the time. And then in the NHL, we'll see what happens when he starts moving up the ladder.
Yep. So
yeah, should be interesting.
All right, guys. Well,
okay.
Have a good rest of the show. Well, hopefully it's a fun tomorrow for Flyers fans.
There you go.
Hopefully, yeah. Dan, thanks for joining us tonight. So, yeah, Russ, it's just going to be just a whirlwind because we've never had.
Yep.
I call it the 8-day crunch. That's what we're going through right now. So.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was just having a conversation with somebody because I've covered the draft since 2001, and a good friend of mine, his anniversary is tomorrow, and he's going to be on the air all day. But he never imagined in his wildest dreams that there would ever be hockey getting in the way with that anniversary date. Like, that's why he got married at that time,
right?
Because it's a good safe date for hockey guys like us. And now all of a sudden it's not. So you just never know, right? In life,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, hopefully this will be the last year. We'll kind of get back on schedule. Yeah. But just before I let you go, Russ. I just wanted to get your impression of how it all went down with the expansion draft, with the era being let out of the balloon by all the rumor guys, particularly Frank Saravalli, releasing this information. Do you think that was, by the time the broadcast came on ESPN, which is marking their great return, they got Chris Fowler, looks a little ossified there and a little out of place. Like the whole thing kind of is like a lead balloon.
Yeah, all right, so it's multi-layered for sure. I mean, the first thing I would say is I get that those guys are doing their job. So first and foremost, I get it. Second thing is it did ruin a broadcast. Like, it did, because I know there was a lot of people that said they weren't going to watch it. And so that's kind of tough. I do think it was still good for, obviously, the people there. I do think it was good for people who were working and aren't glued to Twitter like us. I do think, and that's not to say you don't work. It's just, just saying. I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe, you just sit around all day. But I do think it's one of those things where it made it tough, and I'm waiting to see what the results are ratings-wise. I do think Fowler has to work at it. I do think the whole broadcast has to work at it. I do think it was, like Weeks is great, right? Whatever you have Weeks do, he's great.
Yeah, he's a star.
But even Dominic Moore, I don't know. Do you remember when they got down to Cole Lind, his explanation of Cole Lind? It was basically, yeah, he's from blah, 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 whatever city he's from. And, he could be a good player. And that was it.
Yeah,
yeah. Listen, you've had 10 hours to look up guys and give us something on these guys. I could tell you about Cole Lind, right? But the fact is, he should have been able to tell us about Cole Lind. And so it's little things like that. I don't think they realize how hockey fans are like that. Even baseball fans are a little more forgiving than hockey fans that way, because hockey fans already feel like they're being marginalized because they're like the fourth or fifth sport. And then they always feel like they're being marginalized because there really was no lead-in. And it just went from the X Games to that, where maybe they could have done like something for a half hour, even if it was a 30 for 30 hockey one that they just made new for this, something. They could have had maybe the hockey viewers' attention a little longer instead of having everybody parachute in. And so I do think that was sort of like emblematic of the way it went. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Hopefully they can, get back to what they were before they let the contract lapse. Russ, I told a little fib there. I'm going to ask you one more before you go. What do you think?
Listen, you lie all the time, so I get it.
Yeah, now people who know me can attest to this. What's going to happen, like with the Flyers, in your mind? You think it's obvious that Chuck Fletcher really wants to clear cap space? You saw that kind of alluding to that very strongly, and that the first round draft pick, even though he doesn't want to trade it for just cap space, he wants to make a deal to improve his club. It seems inevitable they're going to find a way to move that pick and get something done.
Yeah, Chuck is talking to everybody, and I'll modify an old phrase from my youth, and we'll just say talk is talk and BS walks.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of talk, but in the end, is it going to generate anything? I think it's very hard. I think most likely they're making that pick simply because I don't think there's a trade out there that's advantageous enough for them to say, all right, we'll give you that pick because we're filling this slot, whether it's another defenseman, whether it's that 3C spot, whether it's the backup goalie that they really need. Because, again, we're pretty sure about Carter Hart, but you really have to have an insurance policy now. Like a guy like Elliott, he was exposed because it was a condensed 56-game schedule. He couldn't play the volume of games in a short amount of time. But now you need to have somebody who could potentially play 35 games or more, just in case Hart were to get injured, in case Hart has, some bad play again and has to just sort of watch for a little while. All those things are possible, so you have to really guard against that. So that's what we're going to see. I think it's going to be harder. I know everybody's like, yes, he's eager to move it, and I do think he's eager to move the pick, but it's only if it really helps the team, because he knows as well as anything that the system is good, but it's not like near the best anymore. It's, it's probably still top 10, but it used to be a lot higher than that. And now that's because you get to that 5-year mark after the draft, and maybe a few guys get traded, a few don't pan out, a few get injured, and all of a sudden, it doesn't look as good as it did before. So they're cognizant of that too.
We'll see what happens. It's going to be a lot of player movement around the league. It's just, we've been hanging on for a while, waiting for something to happen. We'll see what goes tomorrow night, and like he said, by Wednesday we'll have a better idea.
Yes.
All right. So Russ,
he was truthful about that.
Yeah. I mean, things could happen. I mean, how many off seasons where the team doesn't do anything on day one of free agency? It's not quite the death knell, but it usually means they didn't get the guy they wanted.
I will tell you the other drawback. That's true. Just because it hit me just now.
Yeah.
The other drawback is when you're at the draft, and I'm lucky because when I get to do like the pre-show, like I'm still doing tomorrow night, 7 to 8 with Sirius, if people want to listen, XM91 that is.
Yes.
I'm on the draft floor, right? I see the volume of talking between the teams before the draft, when the draft ends, that first night, before the draft starts that next day. You can't replace that. Phone calls are different, man. Sometimes in person, you get different reactions. So I do think there's that too.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that dynamic is missing.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Russ, we know we can get you at sportsology.com. Where can people find you elsewhere on the Twitter sphere, social media, your coordinates, all that kind of stuff?
At Sportsology does a lot of things, Instagram, Twitter. You can look me up on Amazon.com. I have a series on Kindle Vella, and that is if you use the iOS app for Kindle, or you just go to Amazon.com, you could read draft stories. It's Tales of the NHL Draft. The first 3 are free. The fourth one you have to buy tokens, and I'll add to it. They're not for like this year's draft. This is just like over the summer, good reading about things that have happened at drafts, funny stories, those kinds of things. So like, if you like what I do and you want to support me, that's a good way. Also, Full Press Coverage is going to have a bunch of draft coverage that probably just started to come out, and so that'll be leaking out in the next few hours. So there's that too. And then also me on the Buzzcast will be on sometime tomorrow. I'm thinking tomorrow night is probably when it's going to happen. So maybe during the draft. So, we could be those other voices for you. And then we'll have Off the Post over the weekend. So lots to do still.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are listening to this and you haven't heard the Off the Post Radio draft special, okay, at all your favorite platforms, you got to check it out. Or you can go, at Off the Post Radio on Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pinned tweet. It's worth your time, okay? Definitely. Check it out.
We had some great guests.
Yes, you did. Shane's the best. Shane's the best.
Shane Malloy was great. Brad was great. Chris Peters is great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Brad Allen is terrific. So we had a good time with that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. That's for sure, and I know you will too. Russ, thanks again, man, for coming on.
All right, Isaiah, thanks.
You take care.
You too.
Right. Bye-bye. Okay, and now welcome to part 2 of our show, and we are glad to welcome in from SteelFlyers.com, preparing for his own show tonight with Lance Green from FlyersNittyGritty.com. and Bill Meltzer, his distinguished guest. So make sure you check that out if you haven't, if you're listening to this and haven't caught his show. Steel Flyer, how you doing, man?
Hey, man, I am doing fantabulous. I'm actually seeing things happen.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, man. Always a pleasure.
At Steel Flyers 52, right, on Twitter?
Yes, sir, on Twitter, yep.
Okay, so why we wanted to get you in is because you do a great job of kind of sizing up how the fan, the real fanatic, the real Flyers fan thinks, and like always kind of looking at the team and maybe doing a little weatherproofing. Like, okay, yeah, we're good here, but we got to do this, we have to do that. So the Flyers now have acquired Ryan Ellis in a trade. I would imagine, even though it cost us Phil Myers and Nolan Patrick, have done a good job so far getting Ryan Ellis. And today they let go of Shane Gostisbehere to Arizona, as mentioned earlier in our show this evening, for cap space. It cost a couple draft picks. So it's like, where are they at? And like, if you listen to Chuck Fletcher today, it sounds like it's still going to be very difficult to address the needs at backup goalie, the second pair of defensemen, third line center. They're like at a minimum. Like, how are they going to get from point A to point B?
Well, okay, so I get a privilege here because I get to look at it from two different perspectives. So I'm gonna actually put on the analysis glasses, and I'm gonna say this. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm aghast that Fletcher is even doing anything. He said he was going to do stuff, and okay, now I'm seeing you do stuff. So have I seen him do enough? I think there's some more things that are going to happen. There needs to be some more things that need to happen on this roster in order for them to have enough space to do the things that they still need to do. Now, Ellis, great move. I'm okay with losing Nolan Patrick. I felt that his time was done. Okay.
He
needed a change of scenery. I mean, that's just the way it is. It happens.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? He had a lot of pressure put on him, not just from the media and the fans, but I think also from the Flyers. A second-round draft pick. And then constantly being asked, hey, how you feeling? How are things going? When do you think you're going to play? I mean, that's going to weigh on a person to constantly be asked that question, especially when you're in that situation that he was in. You know what I'm saying? And that has to be a tough to try to come back from. So I'm glad to see that he's going to go somewhere, hopefully, where he can potentially shine and do well. That's what my hope is for Nolan Patrick. Philip Myers, I think we have enough depth on the team coming up through that's going to be able to fill that void without any problems. Younger, cheaper, faster, better, stronger. What? I'm all for that. So I still think you're going to need to see some moves because the Flyers have a lot of stuff they still need to do. Yep, they got their defenseman, a perfect player that's going to pair well, I think, with Provorov. He's going to be that calming presence. He has that type of game. I'm really impressed. I was either going to say him or Larson to come in for Philadelphia. That's who I was rooting for, was Larson, Adam Larson from Edmonton. That's kind of who I was kind of shooting that they would try to bring in.
Right, and he's with Seattle. And it's funny, he didn't even consider. He just wanted to get out of Edmonton for whatever reason. But
well, right. But I'm not at all. Now, when you put on the fan side, right? You put on the fan glasses and the hat and whatever else.
Right.
And, you put the jersey on and all that, and you're like, hey, all right, and Ryan Ellis, right-hand shot defenseman, finally. Hey, go. I mean, that's what they need. So they still need to sign Carter Hart to a deal, probably a bridge deal. I'm thinking maybe 2-3 years, maybe 2.7, something like that.
I think a little higher, but yeah, you're in the range. And I got
I'm in the range.
Sanheim,
Yeah. And then they need to bring in that winger. They still need to bring that guy in that shoots first.
You know what? I have a feeling their third line center and a second pairing defenseman to go with Sanheim are going to be higher priorities. But
Even though because we lost Nolan, Patrick, right? In that deal, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, we're kind of who you going to put in there for 3C? I'm seeing some things happen, and even when you look at it from an analysis perspective, you're seeing things happen. Chuck Fletcher did something today that he got Gostisbehere off the books. Yeah, it cost us some draft picks for next year. What, a second and a seventh?
A second and a seventh in 2022. Yeah.
Right. All right. Which I'm impressed that he was able to ditch that kind of contract with only giving up those kind of picks. A second is a little bit more coveted than a seventh, but hey, you got an extra $4.5 million off the books, right? Now that gives you more flexibility to go out and get that 3C guy or that, shooter first guy or, the other players that you mentioned. We need a backup goalie.
Yep.
And a backup goalie is not going to come cheap.
Yeah, it's hard to say what that's going to cost. I could see anywhere in the range of like $2 million to $3.5 million.
I think it's going to be a little bit more.
It's hard to say. Or the Canes going to hang one to Bernier? Or are they going to? Because today they come out and say no, we just didn't believe that Delkovich was quite ready. So they could be trading Bernier or letting. Well, actually, he's going to be a UFA on the 28th when free agency starts.
Yeah, I saw that. That was like, wow, really? You letting Nedeljkovic go?
Yeah, Eisman was funny today. Ask them why did they do it? Well, ask them.
Yeah, dude, Eisman is just a brilliant hockey mind. Okay, I don't care what anybody says. He's done some brilliant things in the hockey world. So, at least in my opinion, anyway.
Well, he's got a young goaltender. I don't. See, the thing is, they want to win now, right? The Canes, and they didn't think that Delkovich was ready to take them all the way, which they have a right to feel that way. So they didn't want to pay him and make a qualifying offer. So that's why it all turned out the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with what Chuck said today, Chuck Fletcher, about what he's doing with the Flyers, I think that. And with how the expansion draft went down, that says a lot about this market for this year, or lack thereof. Because you can obviously tell that Seattle is playing it close to the vest. They're using this huge amount of cap space and being the bank of the NHL as basically a weapon. They're using it to their advantage, and I think it's great. Because now teams have to basically give up a bunch of stuff that Seattle needs, that they're going to cover. See, Seattle wants draft picks. They don't want your $8 million player that's only doing .76 points per game. Jacob Voracek. But they don't want that player. There's guys out there that are bigger, faster, younger, that are doing better for cheaper than that. So I think Seattle's doing it very, very smart. They took Carson Tarwinski. Look, I thought that Knack was going to be protected or not protected. I thought they were going to select Knack, Nicolas Aube-Kubel, because he's the perfect player for them. He's that fourth line young guy that Hackstall covets. And I thought he was going to be the one, but he ended up being protected.
Hey, they got about 10 guys like that, though. That's the only problem.
That's what I mean.
I really think, you know what, though? I think they could end up being, I was talking about earlier with Russ about this, they could end up being a conduit. So if St. Louis and the Flyers want to make a trade for Tarasenko and Jake, they could hold a couple million, maybe, and then they could get a player out of it. And then the two teams can make the money work.
Yeah.
So it's like an NBA kind of trade. So, I mean, that would kind of make sense. But they are going to have to do better on offense. I know Francis, as we saw in Carolina, tends to play the long game, and I thought it was too long when he
little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So, yeah.
Like, I think the average age so far of the guys that he selected was 24.
Yeah.
You sprinkle in Giordano, and he's 37, right? And then I think Drager's like 26, and there's a couple other guys in there that were 27, 28, and 29. But most of all the people he selected were 24, 23. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you think about this team, man? I would like to hear what you think.
Well,
okay. I mean, what do you think? Let's go right off the top. What do you think of Shane Goss's spare move?
Well, I think it's a move they had to make. He didn't really have a future here, and they couldn't afford, with their salary cap structure, to pay a third pairing defenseman $4.5 million. So it was time to go. And since the Flyers have so many assets that have already shown they can probably play in the NHL, that are second round level, seventh, as we all know, is like the ultimate crapshoot. Yeah, it's the right move to make. But it begs the question of, like, what's it going to take to clear another $7 million, or 5 to 7 million? Because if they have 13.8 or 13.9 million, rounding it up,
13
in cap space, and they have to end up paying about 6 to take care of Hart and Sanheim, 6 or 7. So
that's a good guesstimate.
Yeah, so they're only going to have like about $6 to $7 million left, $7 million left to take care of that second pair defenseman. And I'd be looking at David Savard, but David Savard's going to get a lot of money off of his performance in this Stanley Cup finals and in the playoffs in general. I mean, he's a physical. He like Larson, but not quite as talented. It seems to be someone who would be a perfect partner for somebody like Travis Sanheim. The third line center, they'd probably be interested in somebody like Alex Kerfoot or somebody like that, but they can't afford him.
That's actually who I thought that Seattle was going to take was Alex Kerfoot. But
anyway. No interest in even if they held back money. I don't want Adam Henrique or anybody like that.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I don't want anybody old either.
If they can still play and fill that third line role for a couple of years, like I wish.
Okay. But you know what I mean, though.
Yeah. Somebody I wish they had pulled the trigger and made the deal with Paul Stastny instead of getting JVR.
I'm with you on that.
But they didn't want to go the extra year, and then they had Nolan coming in, but when Nolan didn't make it, and Hextall overruled the scouts about Heiskanen. Then you know the whole story. So then they have to come up with a backup goaltender, and I think Bernier is probably going to end up being out there. You have Reimer, guys like that. Yeah. There's talk about Ristolainen moving. The Flyers seem to be enamored of him, but I mean he's making like $5 million, and he's really only a third pair talent in terms of the way he thinks the game. That's a problem.
Right.
So
see, that's why,
would they consider somebody like Nicholas Hjalmarsson who can and move? Maybe he plays it offside because he's left-handed, or Sanheim can. I've read where Sanheim doesn't mind doing that, so that opens up a little bit of the possibility for them.
Yeah, and you know what? Hjalmarsson would not be a bad fit for Philadelphia either, if you must know the truth.
Yeah.
Like I actually thought he would be another guy that would be a good fit for Philadelphia in the hey, we have some money, let's go look at some players. Hey, we could look at Hjalmarsson. He'd be a good player. He'd be a good fit. I like his game. I mean, come on. He would see that's kind of where I'm at here. I think that the Flyers are going to fall just one player short, because I think unless they can move a little bit more cap space, that's the only way they're going to be able to do it. Because with current cap space right now, you're right. They re-sign Sanheim and they pay a Carter Hart. Well, there's half of the money. Whew, gone. Well, you still have big holes, right? You still need that center. You still need that other, you know what I mean?
And other defensemen, yeah.
And you need a backup goaltender.
And a backup goalie. And Olmark looks like he's probably going to re-sign back with Buffalo, and he would have been one of their targets.
Okay. So, I mean, so I don't think they're going to have enough unless they have to move another contract.
Either or make another deal. Or they meet a need by trading one player retaining a little bit of salary. And, Russ Cohen said earlier today, like the Flyers wanted to trade Jake for Tarasenko. St. Louis might not want the money. And Tarasenko has actually had 4 shoulder surgeries, not 3. Even though his doctor testifies that his shoulder is really great, he had a certain procedure that a lot of players have had, and he declared his shoulder to be sound. So, that's the only type of scenario, big contract, not wanted by Team X, traded to Team Y for another team, the same kind of player.
Okay, but now isn't Tarasenko's contract a little smaller?
Yeah, that's what I mean, 7.5. So in other words, this is why I brought up the idea of Las Vegas holding one, or taking the money, extra money from Voracek, shipping him off to St. Louis, and in reward for holding that money, I think you can do this, they would get another player from the Flyers. That player could be a Robert Haig. That player could also be a prospect like Bobby Brink. You
know what, man? Because Chuck watches the show, right? Because I'll tell you what, bro, I really like that idea.
Well, that's
But okay, I
think they can do that.
But yeah, if
it's NBA
I
style.
like that idea though. That's how creative he's going to have to get.
Yep.
Because you're going to have to find that right deal, and I'm glad to see that things are actually starting to happen instead of hearing, I'm on the phones. Well, okay, that's great. You're on the phone, but now I'm starting to see some fruits of the labor. So, all right, cool. I'm happy with some of the deals that have been made. What do you think about the Ellis move? Do you like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, he's the guy I wanted all along. It's not like I didn't want
you
Jones.
Wanted him.
I wanted him because I thought stylistically his skill set most complemented Ivan Provorov, whereas somebody like Seth Jones, to me, is like just a better version of Provorov, and they both struggle in the same areas. It's just Jones a little bit better than Provorov. So even though I wouldn't say that I didn't want Seth Jones, but I was wary. I felt like if they got Ryan Ellis, even with the length of the contract, his number over the long haul is going to be smaller than somebody like Seth Jones. Sans this year. This year, Seth Jones is making 5 point something. But overall, the players they'd be looking at mainly, who were the most suitable, would be making in the 7.5 to even as much as $9 million, like Dougie Hamilton. Who knows? So I felt like, all things considered, that he was the best choice. The caveat with Ryan Ellis is that it kind of behooves you to want to go out and get another defenseman to play the second pair with Sanheim, but also who could spot for Ellis for those 10 to 12 games that Ellis is probably going to miss. So, then you look at somebody like Brandon Montour from Buffalo, Josh Manson from Anaheim, but all of them are going to cost you. I mean, these are guys that you're going to take a look at.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, the fact that stuff is being done to this team to try to improve it instead of, we tried. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that was last year's wrap, right?
Yeah. And even as a fan, it was really tough to watch the last, month of the season.
Oh, yeah, it was brutal.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it's an occupational hazard, you're like, oh man, I have to watch this game. And then you're like, yeah. And when you start to look at it with different perspective of an analyst, there was a lot of things that this team needed to improve on. And I was not hearing the right things from management as to why things went wrong this year. So that's why I went into this whole entire off season with a lot of question marks, a lot of ill faith, if you will, about what this management and team was going to look like, because I really felt that this off season would affect the Flyers for the next 5. You got Giroux and Couturier and Voracek all coming on, and what now? JVR now, all coming off the books within the next 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
not Voracek. Voracek's got another.
Not Voracek's 3.
Right.
Okay.
Right, but the main thing
next...
is Couturier coming up on the deal and him saying, what the heck, I haven't won in more than a decade. I'm out of here. That's what you got to be afraid of. And that's why you want to fortify this thing now to at least you let him, if he's your piece that you're building around, which I'm not sure I would do, but that's a whole other story. Then you have to nail that down a certain level. Here's the window, Sean. It's starting to happen now. It's on now.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to retain somebody like him. Not a Selke Trophy person that's going to be able to, when his contract is up. Are you kidding? Do you have to go out into the open market? I think he would be able to garner top dollar.
Yeah,
that's just my opinion. You know what I mean? So I'm with you on that. I agree. That's how it has to be. You have to have that buildup of team to keep guys here.
Yeah. But just a couple other names, and we just dealt with Arizona. They're looking to dump money. But Darcy Kemper is going to make 4.5 this year. They're going to have to have somebody in goal. But Antti Ranta, who's hurt a lot, I don't know if he's necessarily the best choice to be a backup. He's 32, which is okay for a goalie, but he just gets hurt so much, and he didn't have a great year last year.
Yeah. This is not the best year for backup goaltenders at all. The slim pickings.
Well, you know what might happen?
Very slim pickings.
You know what happened? There are some pretty good, like Frederick Anderson's going to be out there. You figure maybe he's somebody they could take a look at in Carolina, and maybe that squeezes somebody else out. And James Reimer's going to be out there. I'm not a big Reimer fan, but I mean, that might be the level of goalie. Halak is always there, but he's ancient. I don't think he can handle the load.
Yeah, that's true. So, and there might be some other goalies out there that we're not necessarily thinking about.
Yeah.
That could be part of a deal that happens.
That Corpusalo, or I think they're going to keep Mercer.
See, that's who I was thinking. That's exactly who I was thinking.
Yeah, I liked him, except Jason Martinez had Kevin Woodley on his show about, I don't know, it was last week or the week before. He was talking about the deep into the analytics with that, was that the type of chances the Flyers give up, a lot of side-to-side stuff and stuff, he was really awful at. Where someone like Linus Ullmark had better analytics. Like, this is like the next level. Like, Steve Valiquette has a site, ClearSight Analytics. So you really, this is the stuff the clubs are looking at. And I like Corpusalo. It's like, we all like the idea of Corpusalo. It's just, if you deep dive into it, it might not be what you think. Then again, that's what the Flyers defense was last year. What are they going to be this year? Hard to say.
Because clearly they are going to be different. Because you, with Ellis back there now and with Ghost gone, and you're going to have either, I really think you're going to see one of the youngsters is going to come in and shine, either Zamula or, I mean, I would really like to see Cam York play a year down in the AHL.
I
really would. I would prefer that as well too, but I also think that might potentially be something that they do, where they might give him a shot.
Well, they're going to give him a shot in camp. It's just, I think he's going to be a third parent no matter what. And then they'll go from there. Eventually they'll give him more responsibility if he can handle it. I would definitely see him on a second unit power play. Or something like that. But I'm not, I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the position above him. So, I think we're going to have to wrap it there. You got your show coming up, and I think we've given the people some good idea about targets that the Flyers, at least positionally, are going to be looking at, if not all the names. But, for me, and you can just kind of give your own summary, I'm looking at that second pair of defensemen, obviously the backup goaltender. I think they need a third-line center. The alternate would be a shoot-first kind of player, like a Tarasenko, in a swap with somebody like Jake, or somebody like we talked about earlier, like Seattle, or even another team would be willing to take the money and be a conduit for a price, which might be somewhat painful, as we saw today with the deal with Shane Gostisbehere. Final thoughts from you.
Yeah.
Steele.
First of all, thank you very much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. Anytime you need me, bro, all you have to do is give me a call. I'm going to say this. I think that backup goaltender and Carter Hart have to be the number one priority right now, because I just have that feeling, and I really feel that I know that if all else happens, if the Flyers don't do anything else, as long as they get Carter Hart and a backup goaltender, I think the other pieces could potentially come. Maybe not right now, but maybe by the trade deadline or something along those lines, or maybe during the draft. Okay, because I still think there's going to be some draft deals that are going to happen.
Well, that's tomorrow night.
I know. So I'm excited about that, but I like what Flyers have done so far, but I still think they need to move one more contract to do exactly what you said. Backup goaltender, 3C, shoot first guy, another second pairing defenseman. Okay, these are all the holes I think that the Flyers need to fill, and they need to move another contract in order to get the money to do it. That's the only way I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. So it can get 3 out of 4, like the hierarchy in the hierarchy, that should be at least enough to start the season with some hope.
Exactly, and then maybe by the trade deadline, or who knows, something during the season or whatever, you have up until the trade deadline to make any kind of deal that you can. You see what I'm saying? So It might not happen today, or it might not happen during draft day, but it could happen up until the trade deadline.
Yeah, could be. All right, we'll have to wrap it right there. Steele, just again, people, your social media coordinates and your website.
Thank you very much. You can check me out on the web at www.steelflyers.com. You can check me out on Twitter at SteelFlyers52. You can also check me out on Facebook as well, too. Thank you very much for having me, bro.
You're welcome. Everybody, you can check Dan Silver out at dsilver88 on Twitter, at dsilver88. Give him a follow. He loves talking hockey. I'm Isaiah, ISAIAH_520 on Twitter, at Isaiah ISA. Don't forget that _520. And of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're on 12 different formats. Give us a follow or a subscribe on YouTube. If you could give us a 5-star rating, and if you just follow or subscribe on your platforms, it moves us up the charts. And it helps people find our podcast when they're looking for Philadelphia Flyers podcast. It moves us up the charts and people can find us. So it's always free. There's never a charge, and we appreciate that very much. So we're going to be back next week. Maybe we might have an emergency show, depending on what happens in the next couple of days. And sometime next week, we're going to be back with Dennis Bernstein from the fourthperiod.com to talk, to sum up what happened at the draft, and then look forward to free agency. And who knows when else we might be showing up. So until then, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. And thanks again to Russ Cohen and everybody, and Steele. Thank you again. Take care.